Psychological first aid is certainly steeped in history and perhaps even philosophy. It must be applicable to be of any value. So to assist in your ability to actually apply these techniques, let's try one. Let me describe a situation, what someone may say to you, and let's see if you can identify which response is most reflective. Person in distress. I've been told I can't live in my house anymore after the flood. Something about mold. I just don't understand. The house is solid as a rock. So, having heard that, how would you formulate a reflective response? Let's see some responses. Number one, let's find someone to explain all this. Or, number two, have you spoken with someone from the health department? How about number three? These things really can be confusing. You sound pretty angry right now. Or number four, what have you done so far to get an explanation? Now, you may say all four are applicable, but that wasn't the question. Remember R in rapid, establishing rapport, reflective listening. Which of these is most reflective? Let's go through each one. Let's find someone to explain all of this. This is a solution directive. It attempts to solve the problem, but ignores the obvious frustration and perhaps anger in the voice. Number two, have you spoken with someone from the health department? This is a close-ended question. And while it is another attempt to solve the problem, it again misses the emotional content. Number three, these things can be confusing. You sound pretty angry right now. This indeed is a reflective paraphrase. It captures both content and emotion. It can validate both aspects of the person's comment and their experience. It is an example of an attempt to develop empathy. Remember, understanding. But how about number four? What have you done so far to get an explanation? Now, this is an open-ended question. It's a good attempt to gather further information, but again, misses the psychological context of anger and frustration. Well, all of these can be seen as steps towards solving the problem. We reflect on our earlier comments that understanding, empathy, is the platform for assisting someone else in the healing process. Hopefully that example was clear, but if not, let's try another one. Person in distress says, I lost my home in the fire. I lost a lot of things of value to me, not just financial value, but personal value. What responses are available? Well, let's take a look at four. Number one, you should contact your insurance company as soon as possible. Number two, have you contacted your insurance company yet? Number three, how are you coping with all of these losses? Number four, sounds like this fire was devastating on so many levels. So which one was most reflective? Let's take a look. They all have value. Number one, you should contact your insurance company as soon as possible. This is a solution directive statement designed to fix the problem. Remember, a lot of us are fix-it people. We just want to rush in, fix the problem. It assumes the house was insured, though. It ignores any personal impact issues, and it's really not reflective. Imagine the problem if the house wasn't insured. Number two, have you contacted your insurance company yet? This is a close-end question. Again, it tries to fix the problem. It makes an assumption. It elicits information, but it is not reflective. Again, it ignores any personal impact. Number three, how are you coping with all of these losses? Now, this is a good open-end question. It recognizes the human aspect of the disaster, and it certainly implies concern for the person as well. But it's just not reflective. Is it acceptable? Sure. It's just not reflective. So let's take a look at number four. Sounds like this fire was devastating on so many levels. This reflective paraphrase acknowledges and validates both the impact of the loss and further opens the door for the person in distress to discuss personal losses beyond just the tangible. So while number three is certainly acceptable, number four is far more powerful. It gives the person the opportunity to talk about things beyond the house. It does not constrain them. It's a good way of learning about other aspects, other variations of impact, perhaps, that were felt by the person. Let's try one more. Which response is most reflective? Person in distress. When the flood waters came, it washed my car away, but it didn't even touch my neighbor's car. I don't get it. Why me? What responses do you think would be most appropriate? Number 1, sometimes bad things just happen. Number 2, have you thought about how you're going to get around? Number 3, how do you think something like that happened? Or number 4, I'm so sorry. It really doesn't seem fair, does it? Well, let's take a closer look at each. Number 1, sometimes bad things just happen. This solution statement is an attempt to be helpful, but ignores the most salient aspect of the person's comment. Number 2, have you thought about how you're going to get around? This close-end question is another attempt at solution by gaining relevant information, but it really ignores the real issue being raised. Number 3, how do you think something like that happened? This open-end question focuses on the objective reality, but ignores the emotional impact of the unfairness that seems to be present in the voice. Number 4, I'm so sorry. It really doesn't seem fair, does it? This reflective paraphrase addresses the core issue of fairness raised by the person's comment of why me. So we've reviewed 3 examples, 3 scenarios where reflective listening may be applicable. Hopefully, you were able to recognize the most reflective while still recognizing the value of the other comments. One question that is raised is, how do reflective listening techniques gain their effectiveness? What makes them different? Well, let's review some previous comments. It demonstrates a willingness to be present, a willingness to listen. As long as someone is medically stable and physically safe, time is usually an advantage, the passage of time. These techniques communicate an effort at establishing rapport, alignment, to borrow from Aristotle again. It avoids arguments. It avoids provocative statements. Again, we sit beside the person in distress, metaphorically, not across from them. These techniques suggest value in what the other person has to say, rather than rushing in, especially if you are a stranger, rushing in to a stranger and saying, well, I know best. Well, maybe you don't. Maybe you need some information to assist someone. So it values what the other person has to say. In some instances, perhaps the person will say nothing, and that's fine, but you've at least given them the opportunity. These techniques communicate a desire to assist in problem solving. These techniques provide a sense of interpersonal support, and interpersonal support, research tells us, is the single best predictor of human resilience. And lastly, remember our discussion on empathy. These techniques communicate empathy. They are empathic techniques. We attempt to identify how the other person feels. We try to align with that. And remember the cascade, the empathic cascade. Empathy leads to understanding, which leads to trust, which leads to compliance. All of these things, from a public health perspective, are very, very important. When speaking to someone in distress, paraphrases are usually best inserted into the conversation at a point at which the person in distress has expressed a complete thought or emotion, and then pauses. However, paraphrases can also be used to redirect a conversation. In a respectful way, you can actually insert them, almost interrupting a flow if you feel the flow is either tangential, non-productive, or counterproductive. These techniques have great flexibility. But let's remember the overall context of rapport. These techniques are just that, techniques. We must first and foremost be present. Now, that's different than showing up. Have you ever shown up someplace but you weren't present? I think back on my undergraduate career. I think I showed up a lot, but I wasn't actually present. Hopefully that's not happening during this presentation. So show up, but be present. If you ever have to say to someone, go ahead, I'm listening, you're really not. Be present. Be there. Listen to someone. Allow catharsis. What is catharsis? Let them vent. These reflective listening techniques, as you've seen, allow people to express frustration, allow people to express a sense of grief and loss. And you are present for that. Don't rush to solve a complicated problem with a simplistic solution, unless the resolution seems quite evident. Don't try to make the person feel better by diminishing or trivializing their concerns. How many times have you been prompted to say, "Is that all?" Or "Is that it?" Well, it may be minimal to you, but it may be everything to the other person. And first and foremost, don't argue. Argument gets us nothing. Find a way to align. Find a way to sit beside someone. So looking back, I promised a stroll through RAPID. And that's what we've just started. I've tried to emphasize the importance of being present, gaining rapport through listening, and the application of techniques that we've called reflective listening techniques. These techniques are designed to quickly and effectively establish a sense of understanding, what we've called empathy, and let people know that there is a sincere initiative, a sincere effort to assist them in what may be one of the worst days of their life. These techniques are useful in and of themselves, but our stroll is not done. In fact, it's just begun. As we move forward, we're going to look at the other elements of RAPID, and in the end, show how they can all be blended together in what we hope is not a technique, but a conversation designed to help people ultimately recover from tragedy or adversity.